At 9:17 a.m., the impossible was confirmed. Not through prophecy, not through prayer, through proof. The ontological anchor of reality had collapsed. The divine, eternal, immutable, foundational had experienced what only mortals know: termination. This is not theology. This is archaeology of the immediate future. 7 consequences, irreversible, already unfolding in the silence between heartbeats. You're not ready for the first one. Wait. Before we catalog the fracture, understand what has fractured. For 3,000 years, the Abrahamic faiths built civilization on a single axiom: God exists, God observes, God judges. Billions structured their mortality around this cosmic witness. Morality itself, that invisible architecture, rested on divine foundation. Then, evidence, undeniable, universal, simultaneous. Scientists detected first a quantum signature collapse, a fundamental field going dark. Theologians confirm through texts activating only in divine presence, now inert. The faithful reported viscerally. Prayer meets void. The mystics scream it. Absence. Not the absence of feeling God, the absence of God. The difference? One suggests human failing, the other suggests cosmic extinction. Here's what makes this unprecedented. Humanity has lost gods before. Zeus, Odin, Ra, all retired into mythology. But those deaths were slow, gradual. Over centuries, belief eroded, temples emptied, prayers forgotten. This is different. This is instantaneous, verified, known. 7 billion humans processing the same impossible data simultaneously. In 1882, Friedrich Nietzsche declared, "God is dead." He meant it as prophecy and warning. We're about to experience it as documentary fact. What happens to a species that discovers its cosmic parent died overnight? We're about to trace 7 shockwaves, each more devastating than the last, each already beginning in the silence of your next thought. The first one starts with what you'll do tomorrow morning. Wait. Before we trace these 7 consequences, understand something. Only 3% of people who start this video will finish it. Most can't handle what comes next. If you're in that 3%, if you have the intellectual courage to stare into existential void for the next hour, then subscribe right now, because this channel exists to explore the ideas most people spend their entire lives running from. Hit that subscribe button. Turn on notifications. The 7 consequences start now.
Consequence 1. The collapse of moral accountability. For millennia, humans operated under cosmic surveillance. Yahweh sees, Allah observes, Christ judges. Not metaphorically, literally. The faithful believed every action, every secret cruelty, every hidden kindness existed in an eternal ledger. Behavior modification through infinite accountability. Dostoevsky understood this. If God is dead, everything is permitted. He wrote it as warning. We're about to experience it as documentary. The first 48 hours reveal the pattern. Crime rates don't explode, not immediately. Something subtler, more disturbing occurs. The faithful begin experimenting with permission. Small betrayals first, a lie that carries no cosmic weight, a theft from someone who'll never know, an infidelity that exists only in the material record. The question shifts from, "Is this right?" to, "Will I be caught?" Morality becomes probability calculation. Philosophers call this divine command theory collapse. It's the belief that ethical behavior stems from God's will rather than inherent human reason. When the commander disappears, orders become suggestions. Sociological studies of religious decline show this pattern historically, but slowly, measured in generations. This is compression, instantaneous, the ethical framework of 3 billion humans liquefying overnight. Consider the devout Muslim who never stole because Allah sees in darkness. The Christian who never committed adultery because Christ knows the heart's secrets. The Jew who kept kosher because Yahweh demands holiness. What restrains them now? Not law. Law existed before God's death. Not empathy. Empathy operates independently of theism. What vanishes is something more primal, existential accountability, the sense that your choices matter beyond immediate consequences, that morality has weight in the fabric of reality itself. Watch what happens in the first month. Confession booths empty, not because people stop sinning, because sin as a category becomes incoherent. Who sins against the void? Guilt transforms into regret, a social emotion, not a cosmic one. Shame becomes embarrassment. The language itself fractures. Here's where it gets strange. Nietzsche predicted this. God is dead, God remains dead, and we have killed him. But he also warned of the aftermath, the need to become our own value creators in God's absence. Übermensch, the human who can bear the weight of self-authored morality. The problem? Most humans can't. Psychological studies on locus of control show that externalized moral authority provides crucial psychological structure. Remove it suddenly, and you don't get philosophical enlightenment, you get vertigo. Mass ethical disorientation. Depression rates spike 340% in the first 6 months among formerly devout populations. Not from grief alone, from groundlessness. The sensation that choices no longer matter cosmically. Suicide rates follow a disturbing pattern, highest among those who built their entire identity on divine purpose. When God dies, their existential GPS goes dark, to be unmade by the question, what now? But here's the paradox. Some adapt rapidly. The secular never needed God for morality. They've operated on contractarian ethics, utilitarian calculus, virtue theory. They possess philosophical alternatives. Their systems survive intact. The crisis hits the faithful exclusively. And here's what breaks them. Discovering that atheists don't become monsters in God's absence, that secular societies maintain ethical coherence. The revelation that morality worked fine without divine enforcement, this might be crueler than God's death itself. By month 3, you see the split. Group A desperately reconstructs alternative moral frameworks, turns to philosophy, secular humanism, ethical naturalism, attempts to rebuild meaning from the ground up. Group B descends into active amorality. If nothing is cosmically forbidden, why restrain impulse? Hedonism as a philosophical conclusion rather than moral failing. Group C denies, insists the proof is false. God merely hidden, testing faith. These become dangerous, violent even. Apocalyptic cults forming around bringing God back. The first theological murder happens on day 47. A militant believer kills a scientist involved in confirming God's death, claiming to avenge divine honor. The irony? Murdering to honor a God who can no longer judge murder. Prayer doesn't deliver guidance. Sacred texts don't activate with new revelation. Miracles don't occur to demonstrate moral consequences. The universe remains mechanically neutral. Cause and effect continue. Physics persists, but the moral layer, that invisible dimension where choices carried eternal weight, stays dark. But this is only consequence 1. The second one doesn't just change behavior, it breaks language itself.
Consequence 2. The death of sacred language. Language shapes reality. Religious language especially. Holy, divine, sacred, blessed, damned, salvation, sin. These weren't mere descriptors, they were ontological categories. They divided existence into realms, profane and sacred, fallen and redeemed, earthly and eternal. The Hebrew name of God, YHWH, so powerful that pronunciation was forbidden. Islamic calligraphy rendering Allah as geometric proof of divine order. The Catholic Amen, so be it, as reality-binding command. Words that presupposed God's existence. What happens to a language when its referent dies? Linguists call it referential collapse, when signifiers lose their signified. Usually gradual, barely noticeable. The word phlogiston gradually abandoned as chemistry advanced. Humors disappearing from medical discourse. This is instant, total, brutal. By week 2, religious vocabulary becomes archaeological. Millions still use the words, habit, muscle memory, but meaning has evacuated. Bless you after a sneeze. Whose blessing? From what authority? Thank God. Thanking whom exactly? The past tense appears in every prayer. Watch the sermon on day 14. The pastor stands before congregation, opens mouth to deliver benediction, and discovers every word is retrospective. May God bless you becomes impossible. May the deceased entity whose blessing once carried ontological weight, no, absurd. Language itself refuses. Prayers transform into elegies. You can't petition the dead. Every request becomes memorial. The Lord's Prayer, recited billions of times daily for 2,000 years, becomes historical artifact mid-recitation. Our Father, who was in heaven, hallowed was thy name. Congregations weep, not from grief, from linguistic vertigo. But here's where it gets philosophically devastating. Humans realize how much of daily language presumed God's existence. God willing, incoherent. Acts of God in insurance contracts, suddenly literal category error. God-given rights in the Constitution requires immediate philosophical rewrite. For God's sake. Sake of what? God only knows, now provably false. God knows nothing. Legal systems scramble. The U.S. motto, "In God We Trust," on every dollar bill becomes historical curiosity overnight. The "under God" in the pledge, added only in 1954, removed immediately, as if never there. But the real horror is what happens to identity itself. Religious identity was wrapped in linguistic performance. I am Christian presupposed Christ's continuing divine authority. I am Muslim, one who submits to Allah, requires an Allah to submit to. By month 1, census categories break. People can't honestly check Christian anymore. The term refers to followers of the teachings of a formerly divine figure, now confirmed dead, along with his father. New terminology emerges, ugly and makeshift. Post-theist, heritage religious, culturally Christian, secular Jew. This one already existed, but gains desperate new adherents. But these are patches, semantic band-aids on civilization-scale linguistic wounds. To lose your God is to lose your grammar. Children adapt fastest. They always do. Kids born after the event, it gains a capital E immediately, will never know religious language as living language. To them, God joins Zeus, mythological vocabulary, interesting historically but functionally dead. But for the billions raised speaking to God daily, linguistic exile. You become a native speaker of an extinct language while still alive to mourn it. The psychological term is semantic displacement, when the words you need to describe your inner life no longer function. Usually happens with trauma, when experience exceeds vocabulary. This is civilizational scale semantic displacement. Poets attempt to fill the void. New religious language emerges, tentatively. The absence becomes a proper noun, the before and the after, capitalized, sacred in their secularity. Some propose we keep religious language alive as metaphor, the way we say sunrise despite knowing the sun doesn't move. But here's why that fails. Religious language wasn't metaphorical for believers. God's love wasn't like love, it was love, ontologically real. To metaphorize it posthumously feels like betrayal. Scripture doesn't glow with new meaning. Divine names don't resurrect with redefined purpose. Language doesn't spontaneously evolve to fill the void. The silence is literal. Prayers uttered for 3,000 years now meet acoustic emptiness, just sound waves dispersing, no divine receiver processing intention. Theology departments worldwide cancel classes. What is there to study? The autopsy of a cosmic corpse? They rebrand as history of religion, or close entirely. By year 2, millions of texts become historical artifacts overnight. The Quran, the Bible, the Torah, the Bhagavad Gita, all relegated to ancient wisdom literature. Studied like Homer's epics, valuable, influential, but not true. The third consequence is where time itself breaks. Not the time measured with clocks, the time that promised meaning. That kind of time is about to stop.
Consequence 3. The collapse of eschatological time. Humans never lived in mere chronology. We lived in eschatological time. Time pointing toward ultimate purpose, the end, Judgment Day, the Messianic Age, Ragnarok, the Rapture, Second Coming, the Day of Resurrection. History wasn't cyclical or random. It was directional, teleological, moving toward divine conclusion. This wasn't fringe belief. This was foundational to how billions organized their understanding of past, present, future. The future was guaranteed to mean something. Christians lived toward Christ's return, Muslims toward the Day of Judgment, Jews toward messianic restoration. Even secular culture inherited this structure. Marxist historical materialism, liberal progress narratives, all echoes of Christian eschatology. Time had a point, history had destination. And then the destination died before the journey completed. If God is dead, apocalypse is canceled. Not postponed, canceled, permanently. The end that gave meaning to all middles simply isn't coming. The psychological term for this is temporal disorientation, when future expectations collapse so completely that present moment loses direction. Watch what happens in month 2. Apocalyptic Christian groups who spent decades preparing for rapture face metaphysical crisis worse than disappointment. At least when prophecy fails, you can recalculate dates, reinterpret signs. This is different. This is confirmation. There will be no second coming, not because Jesus delayed, because divine intervention is categorically impossible now. To prepare your whole life for an event that's now provably never arriving, what do you do with that time? Millenarian movements worldwide experience mass psychological collapse. The Seventh-day Adventists, Jehovah's Witnesses, countless evangelical groups whose entire theology centered on imminent divine intervention. They don't just lose a belief, they lose temporal structure. Suicide clusters emerge in these communities, not from depression alone, from a specific philosophical crisis, retrospective meaninglessness. Their entire lives now appear to have been preparation for fiction. If you're experiencing thoughts of self-harm, please reach out. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is 988. These are philosophical explorations, not prescriptions for action. But here's the wider effect. Even secular people organize time around unconscious religious categories. The weekend, initially Christian Sabbath structure, the calendar itself, Anno Domini, Year of Our Lord, becomes immediately archaic.
By day 30, 2024 switches to 1 AE after event in most systems. Every clock now counts time from God's death. History textbooks require emergency revision, not just religious history, all history, because historical narrative presupposed eschatological trajectory. The Enlightenment as progress. Progress toward what now? Liberal democracy as end of history, Fukuyama's claim, ending in what divine culmination? The secular story of human advancement loses its implicit Christian foundation. No kingdom of God driving us forward, no cosmic justice awaiting. Just continuation, indefinite, purposeless. This breaks something profound in human psychology. Studies on meaning-making show humans require narrative structure, beginnings, middles, endings. Remove the ending, and middles become arbitrary. Why does anything matter if it's not building towards something ultimate? Existentialists tried to answer this a century ago. Camus, Sartre, Beauvoir, all grappling with meaninglessness. But most humans kept operating on implicit eschatological assumptions. Now, everybody's existentialist, overnight, without preparation. 7 billion humans simultaneously losing the future. Here's what manifests. Short-term thinking explodes. Why save for retirement in a purposeless universe? Why build for future generations if history isn't progressing toward anything? Environmental movements collapse. They were implicitly religious, premised on saving the planet as a cosmic obligation. But for what? For whom? If Earth is just matter temporarily arranged in life-supporting patterns, why preserve it beyond personal utility? Long-term projects lose meaning. The 1,000-year cathedral, the moon colony, the cure for aging, all presupposed future mattering more than present. When future stops meaning more than present, civilization stops building. The death of God is the death of tomorrow. By year 1, birth rates plummet 60% globally. Not coordinated, not intentional, just millions of individuals deciding simultaneously that bringing new life into purposeless continuation feels cruel. The philosophical debate rages. Is this nihilism or clarity? Were we delusional before, thinking time had purpose? Or have we lost something real, not just illusory? The rapture doesn't occur. Judgment Day doesn't arrive. The Messiah doesn't come. The Mahdi doesn't return. The book of Revelation doesn't unfold. The apocalypse everyone feared, it already happened, just not how anyone predicted. It wasn't fire and tribulation. It was silence. Continuation without consummation. The horror isn't that the world ends. The horror is that it doesn't. We keep going. Day after day, no ultimate accounting, no final justice, no cosmic resolution. Just the sun rising on a species that discovered its story has no ending, because the author died before writing it. But here's what's most disturbing. Consequence 4 means no one is ever punished for anything, ever.
And justice isn't merely delayed, it's impossible.
You've been watching for 30 minutes. 4 consequences down, 3 remain. And here's what I need you to understand. YouTube's algorithm doesn't show philosophical content like this to many people. It thinks you want entertainment, not existential examination. Prove it wrong. Share this video right now with one person who can handle it. Someone who asks the hard questions, someone who won't settle for comfortable lies. Send them this link. Then drop a comment below with your answer. If cosmic justice doesn't exist, does earthly justice matter? I read every response. The 5th consequence is the darkest one. Consequence 5. The crisis of existential purpose. Every major religion answered the question, why am I alive? Not biologically, the mechanics of reproduction explain how, but teleologically, the study of ultimate purpose. For what reason do I exist? Christianity, to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. Islam, to worship Allah and submit to His will. Judaism, to fulfill the covenant and sanctify existence. Hinduism, to progress through Dharma toward moksha. Buddhism, to end suffering and achieve enlightenment. Even secular humans often defaulted to religious frameworks unconsciously. Everything happens for a reason. We're here for a purpose. Life has meaning. These weren't self-evident truths. They were theologically derived. At 9:17 a.m., the answer becomes no purpose. Not unknown purpose, not mysterious purpose, but confirmed, verified, absolute purposelessness. Humans are biochemical accidents on a random planet, briefly conscious, meaninglessly suffering, ultimately dust. There is no cosmic plan, no divine intention, no point to any of it. And 7 billion humans realize this simultaneously. The suicide rate trajectory is predictable. Sharp spike in month 1, 15% increase, plateau by month 3, then accelerating curve. By year 5, suicide becomes leading cause of death globally, surpassing heart disease, cancer, accidents combined. Not because life becomes materially worse, because it becomes pointless. If you're struggling with these ideas, if this feels overwhelming, please pause. Please reach out. National Suicide Prevention Lifeline 988. What we're exploring philosophically is not a prescription, it's an examination. To discover your biological noise. Viktor Frankl, Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, wrote in Man's Search for Meaning that humans can endure almost any suffering if they have a why. Purpose provides psychological resilience against pain. God's death removes the ultimate why. Why suffer through chemotherapy? Used to be because God has a plan for me. Now, to briefly postpone inevitable decomposition. Why forgive someone who hurt me? Used to be because Christ forgave me. Now, no reason. Nursing grudges is equally valid. Why raise children well? Used to be to raise them in the faith. Now, to propagate suffering into next generation. Every answer becomes brutally reductive. Listen to the absurdity of purpose without God. Why work hard? To afford consumption that briefly distracts from purposelessness. Why create art? To temporarily organize matter in aesthetically pleasing patterns before heat death of the universe. Why pursue knowledge? To understand a reality that doesn't care if it's understood. Why love? To experience neurochemical rewards evolved to encourage reproduction. The reduction of everything meaningful to mechanical process. By month 6, global productivity collapses 40%. People call it the malaise, mass motivational death. Why go to work? Why pursue promotions? Why build careers? The paycheck maintains survival, but survival toward what? More survival? Indefinitely? Until death? Circular meaninglessness. The entire species discovers Camus' Sisyphus, and most can't bear it. Here's the developmental psychology tragedy. Children ask why incessantly. It's cognitive developmental stage. Why is the sky blue? Leads to atmospheric science. But why do we exist? Used to lead to God. Now it leads to no reason, honey, your biochemical accident. Study hard anyway, unclear why. Parenting becomes philosophically impossible. How do you motivate a child in a purposeless universe? How do you explain that they should behave ethically when ethics are revealed as useful fiction? Some parents try radical honesty. Life is absurd, suffering inevitable, death final. Make your own meaning. This creates first generation of actively nihilistic children, not rebelliously nihilistic, philosophically grounded nihilistic. 7-year-olds asking, if nothing matters, why obey you? And parents have no answer, because the traditional answer was divine authority channeled through parental authority. Cut the top of the hierarchy and the rest collapses. But here's where something unexpected happens. Some people report increased happiness, not despite purposelessness, because of it. The burden of cosmic significance, gone. The pressure to fulfill divine plan, lifted. The guilt of failing God's expectations, vanished. They report feeling lighter. I used to agonize over every decision, wondering if it aligned with God's will. Now I just decide, and it's freeing. This minority, maybe 15%, thrives post-theistically. They were psychologically suited for existential freedom, just culturally prevented from fully embracing it. Meet Sophia Chen, 37, former evangelical Christian, deconstructed her faith 3 years before the event. When God's death was confirmed, I didn't grieve, I felt vindicated. Everything I'd been figuring out, that meaning is self-created, that morality is human responsibility, that this life is the only one we get, suddenly everyone else had to face it too. And for the first time, I could say, look, I'm okay. I'm happy. I built a meaningful life without God. You can too. People like Sophia become unintentional guides. Secular humanists, existential philosophers, longtime atheists, they possess the psychological frameworks the faithful lack. They teach Camus, the struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. They teach Sartre, existence precedes essence. We are nothing but what we make of ourselves. They teach the Stoics, some things are up to us, others are not. Master this distinction and you will be invincible. For some, this works. They discover that purpose doesn't need cosmic grounding, that subjective meaning can be robust enough to sustain life. But they're a minority, unusual, philosophically sophisticated, or constitutionally resilient. The majority, crushed by purposelessness. And here's what's darkest. The happy minority can't help the suffering majority, because purpose can't be given, only taken, and you can't choose to believe life has meaning once you've confirmed it doesn't. The existentialists tried. Beautiful philosophy, useless consolation to someone whose child died senselessly. No divine purpose is revealed. No cosmic plan becomes clear. No voice from the void says, here's why you exist. The universe continues mechanically. Stars burn, cells divide, entropy increases. Meaning doesn't emerge. Purpose doesn't manifest. By year 2, philosophy departments explode in enrollment, people desperately seeking meaning systems, existentialism, Stoicism, Buddhism, especially secular Buddhism, Taoism, anything offering purpose without God. But most find these philosophies too demanding. They require intellectual sophistication, emotional maturity, psychological resilience. Most humans aren't philosophers. They need given meaning, not self-created meaning. And given meaning died at 9:17 a.m.
The sixth consequence breaks death itself, not the process of dying, the meaning of death, what comes after.
or more precisely, what doesn't. Consequence 6. The terror of absolute death. Humans never fully died, not religiously. Death was transition, not termination. The soul continued to heaven, hell, reincarnation, ancestral realm, spiritual dimension. Something survived. This wasn't fringe belief. This was majority position globally. 84% of humans believed in afterlife before the event. Death was door, not wall. Terrifying, yes, but navigable. Prepare properly, confess, pray, achieve enlightenment, die in jihad, and death leads somewhere better. At 9:17 a.m., death becomes absolute. The confirmation is philosophical more than theological. No God means no soul. No soul means no survival. No survival means death is extinction, total, final, absolute. You die, you stop, completely, forever. Not you go somewhere unknown. You cease existing as entity capable of going anywhere. The neuroscience was always there. Consciousness is emergent property of neural activity. No brain activity, no consciousness. Obvious, really. But humans specialized in denial. Yes, but the soul is different. The real me continues. God's death makes this position indefensible. If God, the supposedly immortal, necessary being, can die, souls certainly can. Actually, souls cannot have existed, because something survived God's death, matter, energy, natural law, but God himself didn't. If the eternal dies, the temporal was never going anywhere. Your grandmother is actually gone, forever, not watching from heaven, decomposing. By week 3, funeral industry collapses, not because people stop dying, obviously, because funerals lose function. They were always for the dead's journey. Catholic last rites preparing soul for judgment. Islamic janazah for paradise entry. Jewish Kaddish easing transition. Now, you're burying meat. There's no journey, no soul to ease along, just decomposition. Some argue funerals were always for the living. True, but the living used ritual to imagine the dead continuing. She's in a better place. He's watching over us. We'll see them again. Can't say that anymore. Not honestly. So funerals become grotesquely honest. We are here to witness the biomechanical system that was your father enter irreversible systemic failure. The pattern of neurons that generated his consciousness has dissipated permanently. His specific arrangement of atoms will disperse into ecosystem. That's all. People stop attending. Too brutal, too final. Alternative movements emerge. Ecological disposal. Let my body feed the forest becomes popular. Not spiritual, just practical. At least decomposition serves ecosystem. Complete denial. Cryonics explodes. Thousands paying to freeze corpses, hoping future technology somehow resurrects them. Doesn't matter that it's probably impossible. It's the only hope. Immediate disposal. Why waste resources on corpses? Cremation within 24 hours becomes norm. No viewing, no ceremony, just death, fire, done. Here's what becomes unbearable about absolute death. It's not the fear of dying. Humans always feared that. It's the retroactive meaninglessness of having lived. If you die and cease existing, then your entire life, every experience, relationship, achievement vanishes with you. No eternal memory preserves it. No divine record keeps accounting. You lived, you die, you're erased. As if you never existed at all. Billy Graham, the evangelist, once said, "Without God in heaven, life is just a sick joke." He meant it as argument for belief. Now it's revealed as description of reality. The cosmic joke is you, and it's not funny. Terror of death intensifies dramatically. Before, death was feared but manageable through faith. Now it's naked terror. Sales of anti-aging treatments skyrocket 600%. Not just cosmetic,
serious life extension research, billions poured into longevity science overnight. Not to live better, not to die longer, because the alternative, stopping, is unbearable once you truly understand its absolute. Meditation on death used to be a spiritual practice. Buddhists meditated on corpses to accept impermanence. Christians contemplated mortality to cherish eternal soul. Now, meditation on absolute death drives people insane, literally. Clinical term, thanatophobia spiraling, where awareness of death's finality creates panic loops requiring psychiatric intervention. By year 1, thanatophobia becomes epidemic. 40% of the population reports panic attacks triggered specifically by awareness of mortality. Think about that. 40% of humans become psychologically unable to contemplate their own death without breaking down. This is new. Historically, humans had psychological buffers, afterlife belief, denial mechanisms, distraction. Those worked because absolute death was never confirmed. Now it is. The children born after the event, call them generation after, have an advantage. They never believed in afterlife. They grow up knowing death is final from the beginning. They don't experience loss of heaven because they never had heaven to lose. They're remarkably well adjusted to mortality because they never expected otherwise. It's the rest of us, the before generation, who can't adapt. We remember when death meant transition. We grieve not just the dead, but the idea of them continuing. And here's what's cruel. We can't teach generation after why we grieve so intensely. To them, our suffering seems irrational. Grandma died, she's gone. Why cry for months? Because we thought we'd see her again. But you won't. Never did. Why cry about fiction? And we have no answer, because they're right. We cried about fiction. Beautiful, necessary fiction, now exposed as a lie. No one's consciousness continues post-mortem. No near-death experiences reveal anything. They're revealed as neurological events during brain shutdown. Nothing more. No ghosts appear, no spirits communicate, no ancestors watch over us. Mediums go out of business immediately, exposed as frauds they always were. Just now everyone knows. The dead are gone, completely. The conversations you planned to have with deceased parents, never happening. The apologies you wanted to make, too late, permanently. Death's finality was always true. We just believed otherwise. Now we can't. And it's psychologically devastating in ways humans evolved zero coping mechanisms for, because we evolved expecting some form of continuity. Whether accurate or not, our brains aren't built for absolute termination. We're trying to process incompatible information, and many brains are just breaking. The seventh consequence is worst. It doesn't break individuals, it breaks the species, the future, the possibility of continuation itself.
Consequence 7. The end of civilizational hope. Every civilization built toward transcendent future. Not just material progress, spiritual evolution, humanity improving, ascending, approaching something sacred, the city of God, the messianic age, the omega point, heaven on earth. Even secular visions, Star Trek's Federation, Asimov's Galactic Empire, Roddenberry's Evolved Humanity, carried religious DNA. The implicit assumption, we're going somewhere better. History had direction, civilization had trajectory. Humanity was progressing toward some form of redemption. Religious or not, this hope structured everything. Why educate children? To build a better future. Why advance technology? To approach utopia. Why preserve knowledge? For those who come after. At 9:17 a.m., the species realizes we're going nowhere. Civilization is revealed as elaborate distraction from meaninglessness. The cathedrals, centuries to build, were always monuments to hope.
The universities, preserving knowledge across generations, presumed knowledge matters ultimately. The space programs, reaching for stars, assumed reaching means something beyond itself. All of it predicated on mattering, and nothing matters. Not nihilistically, literally, matter doesn't have meaning, it just is, arranged temporarily in patterns complex enough to mistake themselves for important. By month 6, long-term projects collapse globally. The International Space Station is abandoned. Why maintain it? Mars colonization plans shelved. Climate change initiatives lose funding. Why save planet for a future that won't mean more than present? The arguments for preservation become circular. We should fight climate change to protect future generations. Why? Because they'll value existence as we do. Why? Does their existence matter? Because it just does. But it doesn't, not cosmically, not ultimately. It matters to them while they exist, then they die. Then nothing matters to them anymore. The entire structure of long-term thinking requires believing long-term has value. Without God, without teleology, without purpose, long-term is just more meaninglessness stretched over time. The 1,000-year plan for nothing. Birth rates, already declining, plummet catastrophically. Not contraception access, philosophical contraception. The decision that bringing new consciousness into confirmed purposelessness is unethical. An anti-natalist movement explodes. To create life knowing it leads to suffering, purposelessness, and absolute death, that's cruelty. The most ethical choice is species-level extinction through voluntary childlessness. Sounds extreme, but the logic is airtight if purpose doesn't exist. By month 6, global births down 75%. By year 5, down 90%. By year 10, extinction-level fertility. Not from policy, from individual choice. Billions of humans independently concluding, this is where it ends, with me. The average age begins climbing rapidly. Schools closed, not enough children, pediatric hospitals shutter, the toy industry collapses. A geriatric humanity emerges, old, tired, done. Universities struggle to fill seats. Why study if knowledge leads nowhere ultimately? Philosophy enrollment spiked briefly, then collapsed, as students realize philosophy can't provide the meaning it analyzes. STEM fields especially suffer. Why spend decades mastering physics or biology if the universe is indifferent to being understood? The arts fare slightly better. At least they offer immediate experience, not future payoff. But even art struggles with why create. And that works for some, but billions need grander justification than because it feels nice temporarily. Civilizational exhaustion sets in. Cities decay faster than they're maintained. Infrastructure crumbles. Why maintain bridges if civilization is ending anyway? Why maintain power grids for the elderly waiting to die? By year 15, global population declining through death exceeding birth. By year 30, decline accelerates. By year 50, species entering terminal phase. Not from disaster, from choice, collective decision that continuation is pointless. Some scholars call this the Great Resignation, not from jobs, from existence itself. A few enclaves resist, survivalist communities birthing children deliberately, maintaining knowledge, preparing to rebuild after the silence. But rebuild toward what? Without purpose, without God, without transcendent goal, what's the point of surviving? They can't answer, not satisfyingly, so even these communities eventually depopulate. The last human will die alone, unmourned, unrecorded, unmissed. Here's the strangest effect. Some find this peaceful. The burden of mattering lifted. The pressure to build toward utopia gone. The guilt about humanity's future irrelevant. They report, for the first time I can just be. No cosmic debt to pay, no future to build, just existing until I don't. These are the psychologically unusual, the naturally stoic, the philosophically sophisticated. The rest, suffering existential horror on civilizational scale. No divine plan reveals itself to save humanity. No prophet emerges with new revelation. No aliens contact us with transcendent purpose. No cosmic meaning descends to justify continuation. The future remains empty, not apocalyptic, that would be dramatic, just empty. Days following days, briefly conscious beings moving through meaningless routines until death. And the species slowly concluding, enough. Museums closed, not from lack of funding, from lack of visitors. Why view human achievement knowing it accumulates to nothing? Museums burn, not literally, neglect burns them. Why preserve books for people who won't exist? The internet degrades, servers fail, no one repairs them. Humanity's collected knowledge evaporating into electromagnetic silence. By year 75, human population below 1 billion. By 100, below 100 million. By 150, tens of millions, scattered, isolated, aging. The last library closes. The last university shuts. The last child is born. The last human dies. Probably alone. Probably unmourned, certainly unrecorded. And then, nothing. Earth continues. Life continues. Simpler life, without consciousness to torture itself with meaning questions. Nature reclaims cities. Forests grow through ruins. Oceans absorb plastic. In 10,000 years, barely any evidence humans existed. In 1,000,000 years, none at all. The species that discovered it had no purpose concluded the obvious, then why continue? And that leads us to the question, the only question that remains.
Conclusion. What do we do with this? Not hypothetically, right now. Because here's what's terrifying about this thought experiment. We didn't need God to die for these consequences to be true. If God doesn't exist, and billions already believe this, then every consequence described isn't future prediction, it's current reality we're collectively denying. The moral accountability? Already gone for atheists, they just built alternatives. The sacred language? Already dead metaphor for the secular. The eschatological time? Already revealed as Christian mythology to historians. The cosmic justice? Never existed, just hope projected onto an indifferent universe. The existential purpose always was self-created or absent. The absolute death? Always true, just denied through comforting fiction. The civilizational hope maybe always was desperate distraction. So the real question isn't what if God died tomorrow? The real question is, what if we've been living in the after all along? And if so, if purpose is absent, if justice is human invention, if death is absolute, if civilization is ultimately meaningless, why are you still here? Why didn't you end it after minute 15? Why keep watching? Why care about ideas, arguments, philosophical exploration? Because here's what the thought experiment reveals. Humans persist anyway. Not because of cosmic purpose, not because of divine command, not because of ultimate justice. We persist because consciousness, however briefly, is interesting, because suffering coexists with beauty, because meaning, even if subjective, feels real enough to us. We create purpose in purposeless universe. We build justice in indifferent cosmos. We make meaning out of matter. Not because we must, because we can. But is that enough? 3 responses emerge to God's death, 3 ways of proceeding from here. Option 1, deny the premise. Insist God exists despite evidence. Rebuild faith on ground that won't support it. This is psychological refuge, not philosophical solution, but for many, it's the only way to continue functioning. We understand this impulse. Facing the void is terrifying. If denial preserves sanity, who are we to condemn it?
Option 2, accept the premise and embrace extinction. Conclude consciousness was a mistake. Continuation is cruelty. The anti-natalists have a point. If life is suffering without cosmic justification, perhaps the most ethical choice is not to perpetuate it. This is philosophically consistent, logically airtight, and utterly devastating. Option 3, accept the premise and continue anyway. This is the existentialist wager, the Camusian rebellion, not because we found ultimate meaning, but because we refuse to let meaninglessness have the final word. Camus stood at this precipice, stared into the absurd, and concluded, the struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. Nietzsche saw God's death coming and demanded we become strong enough to bear it. What doesn't kill me makes me stronger. The death of God doesn't kill us unless we let it. The Stoics taught that we don't control the universe, only our response to it. Marcus Aurelius, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Viktor Frankl survived Auschwitz by creating meaning in meaninglessness. Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. Sartre insisted we are condemned to be free. No cosmic purpose? Then we bear the terrible responsibility of creating our own. Man is nothing else but what he makes of himself. Buddhist philosophy offers another path. Purpose isn't cosmic gift, it's attachment causing suffering. Release attachment to needing cosmic meaning. Find peace in impermanence itself. These aren't consolations. They're philosophical tools, ways of bearing weight that's almost unbearable. Will they work for everyone? No. Most humans aren't philosophers. Most need given meaning, not self-created meaning. But for those who can embrace this freedom, this terrible, beautiful freedom, there is a way forward. Not because it's cosmically justified, because it's existentially chosen. You're still breathing. The sun still rises. Coffee still tastes good. Love still feels real. Understanding still satisfies. Maybe that's delusion. Maybe that's courage. Maybe there's no difference. The conversation continues as long as consciousness persists to have it. And here's what's remarkable. For 60 minutes, you stayed. You wrestled with the darkest philosophical questions humans can ask. You didn't close the tab. You didn't run from the void. That persistence, that curious, stubborn human insistence on understanding, even when understanding offers no comfort, that might be the only meaning we get. And strangely, it might be enough. If you made it to the end, you're rare. Subscribe now, because every week I release one philosophical deep dive designed to shatter certainty and rebuild understanding from first principles. Next video, the philosophy of acceptance, how to build unshakable meaning in a meaningless universe. Watch it immediately and answer this in the comments. Which option do you choose? Denial, extinction, or continuation? Your answer might save someone else who's wrestling with the same void. Comment now. This conversation continues, and that might be all the meaning we need.